The Varath sovereignty's central court had the specific, layered quality of an institution that had existed for centuries, and that had, in the centuries, built the particular character of somewhere that understood its own importance, and that communicated the understanding through the specific. Accumulated protocols that centuries of practice had crystallized into the institutional form, not arbitrary, not performed for the performance's sake, but the genuine crystallization of values and hierarchies and obligations that had been, across centuries, refined into the specific, precise language of how things were done here, and what the doing communicated about the person who did them. Sale Roven had been in the court for 9 months. He was 35 years old, an Accord's senior diplomatic envoy, and he had the specific quality that 9 years of diplomatic work had built in him. Not the ceremonial quality of someone who performed the diplomatic function for its symbolic value. Not the strategic quality of someone who managed the diplomatic relationship for its institutional leverage, but the specific, particular quality of someone who understood that the diplomatic relationship was a relationship, and that relationships were built from the accumulated character of how the people in them treated each other in the spaces between the significant moments. 9 years of this understanding applied across 4 postings had built in him the quality of someone who did the actual work of the diplomatic relationship rather than the performance of it. The court was the work's environment. He followed most of its protocols. The ones he did not follow were specific and consistent and visible to anyone who was paying attention, which the court was. He did not perform the 3-point formal acknowledgement for the court's senior officials whose seniority was the product of the position's inheritance rather than the position's merit. The specific, layered bow that the protocol required, and that communicated, in the performing, the acknowledgement of an authority he did not assess as warranting the acknowledgement. He did not use the formal address construction for the council's junior members, who had been allocated the formal address construction, through the political arrangement that the previous reign's patronage system had produced rather than through the function the formal address was designed to honor. He did not produce the performed deference that the court's ambient culture preferred in the outsider's presence, the specific, managed quality of someone who was in the institutional space, and who communicated in the management the acknowledgement of the institution's superiority. He was respectful, he was professional, he was thorough in the protocols that he assessed as warranting the following. He was honest about the protocols he did not. The court noticed with the institutional diligence that the court had been noticing things with for centuries. The specific, methodical quality of an institution whose function included the maintenance of its own protocols, and that was, in the maintaining, building the record of the envoy's deviations with the completeness that the record required. Queen Myra Saul noticed differently. He had been aware of her noticing since the 3rd month, when the specific quality of her attention in the formal sessions had shifted from the assessment quality of someone building the initial picture of a new institutional presence to the different quality of someone who had completed the initial picture, and who was, in the completing, in the space after the initial assessment where the subsequent attention had a different character. The subsequent attention had the quality of someone who was watching something that was worth watching, not the surveillance quality, not the institutional monitoring quality. The specific, genuine quality of someone who found the thing being watched interesting in the particular way of something that was not what the institutional context usually produced. He filed this. He gave it the time. At the 41st formal session's conclusion, the weekly diplomatic review, the alliance framework standard coordination mechanism, the specific, procedural quality of the institutional work that the alliance required, she dismissed the court. The dismissal was the Queen's prerogative, and the court complied with the dismissal's institutional authority, with the specific, efficient quality of an institution that knew its prerogatives and the Queen's among them. The chamber emptied with the procedural quality of the court's senior officials, and the coordination staff, and the alliance framework's administrative personnel performing the dismissal's requirement with the competence the requirement merited. The chamber was empty. She looked at him. She said, in the specific, controlled quality of someone who had been considering the saying before the saying, and who was, in the saying, doing it with the precision of someone who had chosen the words with care. "Be careful, human." He looked at her. "You are making this hard for me," she said. He looked at her across the empty chamber with the 9 years quality. The specific, comprehensive attention of someone who read the significant thing accurately and who was, in the reading, building the complete picture of what the significant thing was and what it required. He said, "What am I making hard?" She looked at him with the full, direct quality of someone who had said what she said, and who was, in the looking, in the space after the saying where the said thing's consequence was determined by what the recipient did with it. Not testing him the specific, genuine quality of someone who had committed to the saying and who was, in the commitment, present in its aftermath. "The governance," she said. "The court, the alliance framework's management." She paused. "The specific, accumulated quality of what 11 years of the throne has required me to build." He looked at her. "Tell me what 11 years has required you to build," he said. She looked at him for a moment, the full assessment quality, the thorough reading. "The distance," she said. "The institutional quality, the particular character of someone who governs from the position rather than from the person. The specific, continuous quality of someone for whom the governance is the complete context, and who has made the governance the complete context because the governance, as the complete context, is what the throne requires and what the sovereignty needs, and what 11 years of being both of those things has produced." She paused. "The distance is not the absence of the person. It is the governance of the person's presence in the institutional context, the specific management of the person such that the institution's requirements are not compromised by the person's character." "And I am making that management difficult," he said. "Yes," she said. "The protocol deviations are the symptom, they are not the cause." "What is the cause?" he said. She looked at him with the quality of someone who had been building to this answer for 9 months and who was, in the building's conclusion, giving the answer with the completeness it deserved. "You are honest," she said. "Not the diplomatic honest, not the managed quality of someone who says what is accurate within the boundaries the context permits. The actual honest. The specific, complete quality of someone who says what is accurate because it is accurate and who does not perform the adjustment that the context prefers." She paused. "In 9 months of the alliance framework, the formal sessions and the coordination mechanisms, and the 100 small interactions that the framework produces daily, you have been consistently, completely honest in the way that the diplomatic context does not usually produce. The protocol deviations are the honesty's visible expression. They are not the significant thing. The significant thing is the quality underneath them." He was quiet for a moment. "The quality underneath them," he said. "The genuine quality," she said. "The specific character of someone who is present in the institutional space with the honest quality rather than the performed quality. The person in the institutional context rather than the function in the institutional context." She looked at him. "That is what is making the distance difficult to maintain." He looked at the empty chamber and the institutional architecture and the court's quality and the 9 months. "There is an ancient law," he said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "You know I know about it," he said. "Yes," she said. "The Accord's diplomatic briefing documentation includes it. The alliance framework's establishment required the documentation review." "The law governs the monarch's personal attachments to outsiders," he said. "Yes," she said. "The law was established 3 centuries ago. 3 instances across the sovereignty's diplomatic history in which the monarch's personal attachment to an outsider had been exploited as a strategic vulnerability. The attachment used as a lever. The monarch's feeling for the outsider used to move the governance decisions in the outsider's civilization's direction." She paused. "The law's establishment was the institutional response to the 3 instances. The response was the prohibition, the formal legal prohibition of the personal attachments formation between the monarch and outsiders whose presence in the court was the result of the institutional framework rather than the person's own choosing. Outsiders like a permanent diplomatic envoy," he said. "The permanent diplomatic envoy posting was created for the alliance framework," she said. "The posting had not existed before the alliance framework's establishment. The ancient law's specific condition, the outsider's ongoing, proximate presence in the court's operational spaces as the result of the institutional requirement, had not been present in the sovereignty's diplomatic history in the form the posting produces." He looked at her. "Until me," he said. "Until the alliance framework produced the posting," she said. "Until the posting produced you." He was quiet. "The warning," he said. "Be careful, you are making this hard for me. The warning is genuine." "Yes," she said. "The warning is genuine. The honesty and the protocol deviations and the specific quality of someone present in the court's institutional spaces with the genuine quality. These things are producing something that the ancient law exists to prevent. I am telling you this so that you understand the cost, not to ask you to stop. I have been watching you for 9 months, and I understand that the genuine quality does not have a managed version. I am telling you so that the cost is visible to both of us rather than only to me. He looked at her. The cost is yours, he said. Yes, she said. The cost is the management's resource, the specific, continuous quality of maintaining the distance in the proximate presence of the thing the distance is from. The management's resource has a limit. I am telling you that the 9 months have been approaching the limit. He looked at the empty chamber. What do you want me to do? He said. She looked at him with the full quality. I want you to understand, she said. Not to perform the deference you do not believe the context warrants. I am not asking that. I am asking you to understand that every honest word and every protocol declined and every genuine quality present in my court is accumulating a cost that is mine to pay, and that the paying is becoming significant. He looked at her. I understand, he said. Good, she said. Then be careful. He looked at her. I will understand the cost, he said. I cannot be less honest than I am. The quality does not have an off position. She looked at him for a long moment with the specific, controlled quality of someone who had expected this answer and who was, in the receiving, present in the receipt. No, she said. I know it doesn't. She looked at the chamber and the institutional architecture and the 9 months and the limits approach. That, she said, is the problem. The subsequent weeks had the specific, ambient quality of a situation that had been named, and that was, in the naming, present in a different way. The particular character of something that existed before the conversation, and that existed after it, with the additional quality of being acknowledged rather than simply being. He continued to work. The Alliance Framework's daily operational requirements had the specific, continuous quality of a working diplomatic relationship that was, in the working. Doing what the working relationship was for. The coordination mechanisms and the formal sessions, and the resource exchange logistics, and the intelligence-sharing protocols, and the 100 small frictions that the proximate existence of 2 civilizations' institutional frameworks produced, and that required the patient, honest attention of someone whose function was being present in the friction. He was present in the friction with the honest quality. He also watched her manage the cost. He watched it with the 9 years quality, the specific, comprehensive attention of someone who read the significant thing accurately and who was, in the reading, building the picture of what the management required and what the management produced. The management required the institutional distance maintained in the formal sessions with the full quality of the governance function. The management required the court's protocols performed with the completeness the court required. The management required the Alliance Framework's coordination managed with the professional quality of someone for whom the framework was the function. The management required all of these things continuously, in the proximate presence of the thing the distance was from, with the full resource of someone who had been governing for 11 years, and who understood what the governing required. He saw the cost. He saw it in the specific, small ways that the 9 years reading quality had built. The particular quality of her attention in the formal sessions when his agenda items arrived. The specific, brief quality of something managed when their paths crossed in the court's operational spaces between the formal sessions. The occasional, involuntary quality of her attention moving to him in the coordination, mechanisms, margins, and then, with the managed quality of someone doing the management's work, moving away. He saw also the political pressure. The court's senior officials had been documenting the protocol deviations with the institutional diligence that was the court's natural quality, the specific, methodical record of every instance, every session, every coordination mechanism. The documentation had been circulating through the sovereignty's governance structure with the quiet, purposeful quality of information moving toward the people who would find it significant. The people who would find it significant. The specific, identifiable faction in the sovereignty's court, whose institutional position depended on the sovereignty's isolation from the Accord's influence. The faction that had opposed the Alliance Framework's establishment, and that had been, in the 8 months since the establishment, looking for the specific mechanism that the Alliance Framework's existing structure provided for the framework's destabilization. The ancient law was the mechanism. He confirmed this through the Accord's diplomatic intelligence picture, the standard monitoring of the court's institutional movements, that the alliance framework's diplomatic provisions authorized, and that the Accord's diplomatic mission maintained as the standard function of a diplomatic posting in a complex institutional environment. The intelligence picture showed the documentation's circulation and the faction's assembly of the record, and the specific, procedural quality of people building the evidentiary foundation for the ancient law's institutional mechanism. The attachment review petition, the formal mechanism by which the ancient law could be activated. The petition filed by a sufficient number of the sovereignty's court officials asserting the monarch's attachment to an outsider in violation of the ancient law, triggering the public institutional review process that would examine the evidence and determine the attachment's existence. He brought this to her, not through the formal channel, the coordination mechanism's standard schedule or the formal sessions request process. He went to the specific, direct route of someone who had the information that the person needed and who understood that the information's timing was the relevant variable. She was in the governance chamber, the private working space of the monarch's daily function, the specific, functional quality of a room built for the actual work of governing rather than the presentation of governing. Not the formal sessions chamber with the institutional architecture and the court's audience. The working room, the documentation and the governance council's advisory submissions, and the intelligence briefings, and the specific, continuous quality of the actual function's daily requirements. She looked at him when he entered. "The faction is building the attachment review petition," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "How long have you known?" she said. "The intelligence picture has been building for 3 weeks," he said. "I confirmed the petition's construction yesterday." "The Accord's diplomatic intelligence picture," she said. "Yes," he said. "You are using the Accord's institutional resource," she said, "to monitor the sovereignty's internal governance movements." The alliance framework's diplomatic provisions authorize the standard monitoring of the court's institutional movements as the standing function of the diplomatic mission's operational requirement, he said. The petition's construction falls within the standard monitoring scope. She looked at him. "That is the institutional justification," she said. "Yes," he said. "And I am giving you the information because you need the complete picture, and the complete picture is the honest thing to give you." She looked at the governance chamber's working surfaces and the documentation and the intelligence briefings. "The petition's evidentiary record," she said. "The protocol deviation documentation." "Yes," he said. 9 months of the court's senior officials' documentation. The formal session's attendance records annotated with the faction's attention quality notation. The coordination mechanism's margins recorded. He paused. "The record is thorough." "It would be," she said. He looked at her. "The petition's filing will activate the public institutional review process," he said. "The review panel constituted, the documentation filed publicly, the public process conducted with the institutional transparency the mechanism requires." "Yes," she said, "I know the mechanism. The public process's record," he said, "will be available to every party with an interest in the alliance framework's stability or its destabilization." "Yes," she said. "The petition is not about the ancient law. The ancient law is the vehicle. The petition is about the alliance framework." "Yes," he said, "that is my assessment." She looked at him. "You brought me this," she said. Not an accusation, the specific, careful quality of someone noting a fact. "Yes," he said, "because the complete picture is the honest thing to give," she said. "Yes," he said. She was quiet for a moment with the quality of someone who has received the information, and who is, in the receiving, building the complete picture of what the information means, and what the complete picture requires. "The Accord's diplomatic provisions," he said. Section 14. The provision for the diplomatic envoy's status in the event of the host civilization's internal institutional process that directly implicates the envoy's conduct. She looked at him. "The provision authorizes the temporary reassignment," he said. "The envoy removed from the court's operational spaces during the institutional process's duration. Without the envoy's presence, the petition's ongoing evidentiary construction is interrupted. Without the ongoing construction, the petition's filing is the complete record rather than the living document." "You are proposing to invoke the provision," she said. "I am describing the provision," he said. "The decision is yours." She was quiet. If the provision is invoked and the temporary reassignment proceeds, she said, the review panel examines the existing record. The existing record's documentation is the protocol deviation records and the attention quality notation and the coordination mechanism's margins. She paused. The existing record is circumstantial. The ancient law's mechanism requires the direct evidence of the attachment's existence. Yes, he said. The likely outcome is the insufficient evidence finding. The petition is dismissed. At the cost, she said, of the public record, the public process, the sovereignty's institutional history containing the monarch's attachment review. Yes, he said, that cost. She was quiet for a longer moment. He looked at her. There is a second option, he said. She looked at him. I do not invoke the provision, he said. I remain in the court. The public process proceeds. The review panel has the existing record and the ongoing record. The ongoing record, he paused. The ongoing record contains what the ongoing record contains. The direct evidence, she said. Yes, he said. You are proposing, she said, that the direct evidence be present in the public record. I am describing the second option, he said. The decision is yours. The direct evidence in the public record is the end of the distance, she said. Yes, he said. The distance was protecting, she said, the governance's stability. The alliance framework, the court's institutional character, the ancient law's purpose. Yes, he said. The distance was protecting all of those things. She looked at him, and the distance was also protecting, she said. Yes, he said. The distance was also protecting that. She looked at the governance chamber and the working surfaces and the documentation and the petition filed and the public process beginning. He looked at her. The ancient law, he said. 3 centuries ago, the 3 instances, the attachments exploited as strategic vulnerabilities. Yes, she said. The exploitation required the opposition of interests, he said. The attached outsider whose civilization's interests were opposed to the sovereignties. The attachment used as the lever to move the monarch's governance decisions toward the outsider's civilization's interest and away from the sovereignties. Yes, she said, that is the law's premise. The alliance framework, he said. The accord's interest and the sovereignty's interest aligned. The alignment documented and negotiated and built into the framework's architecture. The framework is the documentation of the aligned interests. She was quiet. You are saying, she said, that the ancient law's premise does not apply. I am saying, he said, that the distance was protecting against a vulnerability that the aligned interests eliminate. I am not a lever. My civilization's interests and your civilization's interests are aligned by the framework we both serve. There is no direction in which any attachment between us moves your governance decisions that is not also the direction the aligned interests move them. He looked at her steadily. The ancient law was written for the opposed interests. The opposed interests are not present. She looked at him for a long time. That is a careful argument, she said. It is an honest argument, he said. The careful and the honest are not always the same thing, she said. No, he said. In this case, they are the same thing. She looked at the governance chamber's working surfaces. She looked at the documentation and the intelligence briefings and the petition and the public process and the 2 options and the aligned interests argument and the distance and what the distance had been protecting. Be careful, human, she said. The same words as the empty chamber's warning. But the quality was entirely different, not the warning's controlled precision, but the specific, genuine quality of someone who was in the space the warning had been protecting against, and who was, in the being, finding that the space was not what the warning had assumed. You said that to me, he said, in the empty chamber. Yes, she said, because the honest quality was making the distance difficult to maintain, he said. Yes, she said. The distance was protecting the governance from the cost, he said. Yes, she said. And the cost, he said. She looked at him. The cost, she said, has been accumulating for 9 months. She looked at the governance chamber and the 11 years and the complete context. The governance has been the complete context for 11 years. The specific, continuous quality of someone for whom the governance is the complete context, because the governance requires the completeness, and the completeness requires the governance, and the 2 have been the same thing for 11 years. She paused, and then the alliance framework produced a permanent diplomatic envoy who was honest in the way that the diplomatic context does not produce, who declined the protocols that did not warrant following. who said what was accurate because it was accurate, who brought the intelligence picture because the complete picture was the honest thing to give. She looked at him, and the completeness became insufficient. He looked at her. Insufficient, he said. Yes, she said. The governance was the complete context. And then the 9 months produced the specific accumulated quality of someone in whose presence the governance's completeness was not adequate, not the complete picture. The governance and the person inside the governance and the specific thing that the distance was protecting, and that the distance was also, in the protecting, keeping from being present. He looked at her. What was the distance keeping from being present? He said. She looked at him with the full underneath quality, not the Queen's quality, not the 11 years institutional quality. The quality of the person who had been governing from inside the governance's complete context for 11 years, and who was, in the governance chamber at the 9 months of accumulated cost, in the space after the distance. The genuine space, she said. The honest space. The space where the governance is not the complete context and the person is present rather than the function and the cost is present rather than managed. She looked at him. The distance was protecting the governance from the genuine space. And the genuine space has been, she found the accurate word, present anyway, in the 9 months, in the protocol deviations and the honest words and the complete picture given because the honest thing was to give it. She paused. The distance has been protecting the governance from something that has been present despite the distance. He looked at her. The cost is worth paying, he said. Not a question, the specific, direct quality of someone naming the accurate thing. She looked at him. Yes, she said. The cost is worth paying. That is what the 9 months have produced in the specific, honest way of things that 9 months of the genuine quality produce. She looked at him with the full quality, the Queen's quality and the person's quality, the 11 years and the 9 months, and the warning and the petition and the honest argument and the genuine space. The cost is worth the paying. The distance was protecting the governance from something that the governance in the 11 years has not had. And the having, she found the word with the precision of someone for whom the precise word was the honest word. The having is worth the cost. He looked at her. He looked at the governance chamber and the private working space and the petition and the public process and the 2 options and the direct evidence and the ancient law and the aligned interests argument and the distance and what the distance had been protecting and what the distance had been keeping from being present. The direct evidence, he said. Yes, she said. In the public record, he said. Yes, she said. The end of the distance, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at her steadily. Then the distance ends, he said. She looked at him with the full, complete, genuine quality, not the controlled quality of the empty chamber's warning, not the managed quality of the cost's ongoing management, the specific, underneath quality of someone who had been the governance's complete context for 11 years, and who was, in the governance chamber at the 3 days before the public process, present in the genuine space. Yes, she said, the distance ends. They were quiet for a moment with the specific, genuine quality of 2 people who had arrived at the significant thing, and who were, in the arriving, present in it with the full quality of people who had been building toward it across 9 months of protocol deviations and honest words, and the cost, and the warning and the intelligence picture and the aligned interests and the worth of the paying. He looked at her. Myra, he said. Her name in the Accord's personal register, not the Queen's formal designation, not the sovereignty's monarch's institutional address, not the diplomatic envoy's professional form. The name in the register of the genuine space, the register of the person rather than the function, the name said by someone who was present in the genuine space to someone who was also present in it. She looked at him. The ancient law, he said. The aligned interests, the honest argument. Yes, she said. The petition's public process, he said. The review panel, the direct evidence. Yes, she said. The public record will contain what the public record contains, he said. Yes, she said. And the alliance framework, he said, will be stronger for it, she said. The honest argument is accurate. The aligned interests are real. The faction's petition will produce the public record, and the public record will contain the honest argument and the aligned interests, and the direct evidence of something that the ancient law's premise, the opposed interests, the strategic vulnerability, does not describe. She looked at him. The petition was built to destabilize the alliance framework. The public process will produce the opposite. Because the genuine quality is not the strategic vulnerability, he said. Because the genuine quality, she said, is the aligned interest's most honest expression. He looked at her. Outside the governance chamber, the sovereignty's institutional framework continued its operations with the patient, procedural quality of centuries of institutional practice. The petition filed, the review panel being constituted, the public process beginning in 3 days, the faction watching with the deliberate quality of people who had built the mechanism and who were waiting for the outcome they had built it for. Inside the governance chamber, the private working space of the monarchy's daily function had the specific, quiet quality of the genuine space, the honest space, the space where the governance was not the complete context, and the person was present rather than the function, and the cost was present rather than managed. The distance had ended, the cost was present, the paying was worth it, the honest argument was accurate, the aligned interests were real. And in the governance chamber's genuine space, the Queen of the Varath sovereignty and the Accord's diplomatic envoy were present in the specific, honest quality of something that 9 months of protocol deviations and honest words, and the warning said quietly, and the cost accumulated, and the faction's petition and the worth of the paying had built. Not the distance, not the performed deference, not the governance as the complete context, the genuine space, where the honest quality had been present despite the distance, where the cost had been worth the paying all along, where the significant thing was, as it had always been in the 9 months of the Alliance framework's fragile, honest, genuine work, simply present, worth the cost, together. Which was, as the 9 years and the 11 years and the 9 months, and the warning and the honest argument, and the aligned interests, and the petition and the genuine space had always been building toward, in the specific, patient way of significant things that built themselves from the accumulated quality of honest words, said in institutional contexts, that preferred the managed version, exactly where the genuine quality had been leading. All along simply present, real,